Here's 3 things you can do right now to improve your footage regardless of what it's being shot on. What's up, guys? It's Dave Mack again. When I got started on this career, truthfully, I had no idea how expensive it was going to be. And with that being said, sometimes it's very easy to get caught up in the limitations of the gear we have. We are currently in an era where access to filmmaking gear between smartphones and entry-level cameras is cheaper and more accessible than ever before. Here are a few things you can do to improve your footage regardless of the camera and the gear you have. Tip number 1, shoot shadow side. Now, a huge job we have as filmmakers or cinematographers is to try to take this 2D medium that we're provided with, like a screen, and make the viewer feel as if it's 3D. But how is this really done? Well, if you watch your favorite Hollywood movies, the main way that they do this is with light and specifically contrast within the image that you're viewing. If an image is overly lit and lights are turned on everywhere and it's just kind of washed out, often it will feel very flat as well. So, a great way of approaching lighting is not about what can I light up necessarily, but more about what can I turn off? What can I take away? Where can I be selective with that lighting? When you turn lights off or when you open windows, close windows, essentially what you're able to do is create, in its simplest form, a light side of your image and a dark side of your image. So when I say shoot shadow side, what I'm referring to is putting your subject, your product, your clothing article, whatever it is you're shooting, between your light source and the camera itself. In doing this, by shooting shadow side, what you're doing actually is creating a lot more depth and a lot more contrast in your image that in turn gives it that cinematic feel. This is one of the unwritten rules of cinema, if you will. So keep an eye out for it in your favorite movies and shows going forward, and I promise you'll see it more often than you thought. Tip number 2, motivate your light. While we're on the topic of light, a huge thing to consider in achieving that cinematic look is motivating your light. In other words, where does the light actually come from? Now, an important distinction is that motivating your light doesn't mean that's actually where your light's coming from. Motivating your light refers to convincing your brain, and more importantly, the brain of your viewers, that that's where it's coming from. In other words, it's about making the scene look natural. So let's take a look at a project I did with an artist from here in Winnipeg who goes by the name of Miosway recently. In this frame, you can see the TV being turned on and immediately emitting a soft flickering glow, something that we might see in the late nights or early mornings in real life. On top of that, we have a window in the background emitting some ambient light as well. The trick here, though, is that neither of those light sources are actually what's lighting the scene. For the TV, we actually have one of our extra hands on set beneath the TV who turns on a tube light as soon as the TV turns on in real life. In other words, we're convincing you or trying to convince you that all the light in the scene is coming from natural sources. The same can be said for this scene from a music video I did about a year and a half back with an artist from Winnipeg who goes by the name of Vital. In this scene, we have lights in the background providing what we think is the light source for our shot, when in reality, we have a bigger light just off camera left that's doing it. Motivating your light is about convincing your audience that the light in your scene is coming from natural sources, or what we see on screen, which we refer to as practical lights. The key to good lighting is amplifying what already exists so we don't feel like we're stepping out of our natural environment to achieve that look. Now, like any other rule in cinematography, this rule has its exceptions. For example, the show Euphoria, which uses very dramatic colored lighting that seems unnatural, but that all exists within the environment the show is created, and as such, doesn't feel unnatural to the viewer. Now, the last tip we have has to do with the composition of your shot, and that tip is called dirtying your frame. I know the idea of dirtying your frame sounds stupid, given that as cinematographers, we're trying to make things as perfect as possible, but hear me out on this. A lot of times, that perfection that we strive for often feels very unnatural to the viewer. So one thing cinematographers do a lot of is what we call dirtying your frame. Now, dirtying your frame does not mean getting messy with it or being careless with it. It actually refers to strategically placing things in your frame, oftentimes in the foreground, to give it shape and context. Again, here is a scene from that same project with Miosway where we use a plant on one side of the frame and his shoulder on the other to pull focus in towards what is supposed to be the focus of the shot, the mirror. Now, of course, we could have just shot his face, and I'm sure that would have been fine. But by shooting it the way we did, it allows the viewer to feel immersed in the scene, almost as if they are a character occupying a physical space as opposed to just an abstract entity watching from the sidelines. And again, same thing here from another past project with Miosway from a few years back, where his friends and the contents of the pool table frame and provide some context and some depth to the shot we're going for. If you want to see a great example of this technique being used in a big-time Hollywood production recently, check out The Batman, where they use this technique extensively and honestly, unbelievably well. This concept of dirtying the frame will help you create a much more dynamic image. And another great example of this is a couple of side-by-side photos from a project I did with a local client here. This technique also works great in things like concerts and more run and gun situations, where you could use the audience and movements and shapes within your frame to create a much more dynamic image. As I said, these 3 tips are things I picked up along the way that have helped me greatly improve the quality of footage I'm able to deliver, and as such, have really progressed my career. Shadow side, motivate the light, and dirty the frame. Hopefully, these tips are as helpful to you as they have been for me in my career, and I look forward to talking to you in the next video.